The following is a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio. Want the real story behind the sound bites and headlines? Let's find the facts. Remember, it's not a conspiracy theory if it's the truth. You are not paranoid or confused. You just need to know.
Welcome, everybody. It is time for everything you need to know. Kip Kiefer with you. My broadcasting chops are, broken in over the last 5 or 6 days. Been subbing a lot over on Talk 99.5 in Birmingham. Been doing their morning show and had a lot of opportunity to pontificate on numerous subjects. Now back here on TKR after spending the weekend with my partner Terry Quillian on the shows on Jocks 94.5 in Birmingham, talking college football predominantly, all things sports. And now we shift to Need to Know on the morning of December 30th, Monday, last 2 days of the 2024 calendar year. And of course, we have to start off with the news overnight that President James Earl Carter, Jimmy Carter, passed away yesterday in Plains, Georgia, surrounded by friends and family at 100 years of age. Jimmy Carter now he belongs to the ages. What an interesting character James Earl Carter was. President elected 1976, former governor of Georgia, gentleman peanut farmer. And a lot of people, I think, falsely don't really understand that this was just not some hick from Georgia who kind of got up into the ranks. This guy was a nuclear engineer. You don't see many peanut farmers that are also have their side gig is nuclear engineer, but that is who Jimmy Carter was, a very complex individual, got interested in politics, became governor of Georgia in 1970, was completely unknown when he made the run for the presidency in 76. And amazingly got the nomination and beat Gerald Ford in one of the closest elections in the history of our country. Carter came along in his political career just at the right time because of the fact that the scandal with Richard Nixon and Gerald Ford becoming as vice president, becoming president when Richard Nixon, I will resign the office of president tomorrow at noon. Dramatic stuff in the early 70s. Gerald Ford stepped in. And one of the things that probably did Gerald Ford in was he, in his presidency, completely pardoned Richard Nixon from any wrongdoing in terms of being prosecutable, which was probably the right thing to do. He's a former president. He obstructed justice and did a lot of things that Congress didn't like. But Richard Nixon did not need to go to prison for that. Richard Nixon suffered the ultimate humiliation by having to step down from the presidency and basically lived his life in isolation from then on. No public appearances or events because the disgrace and the embarrassment of the presidency going up in smoke was certainly punishment enough. So Ford was unduly criticized for that. Probably Carter could have beaten just about any Republican. For him to get the nomination in 76 was a big deal. And Carter's presidency historically goes down as one of the worst in our American history. There was terrible inflation at the time. His appointee to the Federal Reserve raised interest rates to all-time record levels. We fell into a recession. Nobody had any money to spend. Gas lines were prevalent. Gas went from in that era from about 50 cents a gallon to over $1.50. People thought that was the end of the world, and there was terror in the streets. But Jimmy Carter did some good things in his administration. He brought Menachem Begin, the prime minister of Israel, and Anwar Sadat from Egypt together and ended many years of war and conflict. Egypt and Israel have really not been in direct conflict since those Camp David Accords negotiated by Carter in 1978. But he also had his presidency stained at the end by the disastrous situation in Iran when the revolutionaries captured 54 American diplomats from the American embassy and held them hostage for the final 444 days of the Carter administration. That was almost 2 full years. Actually, that's not right. That was actually 1 full year and another third of a year. So Carter, 444 days as president, could not get the hostages, American diplomats, released. These weren't tourists or people just in the wrong place at the wrong time. These were the people worked at the consulate for the United States of America in Iran, and he just could not get it done. He tried desperately to salvage things with a rescue mission that was poorly planned and even more poorly executed. A couple of American helicopters in a dust storm in the desert, getting ready to embark on that mission, collided in the air, killing 8 U.S. servicemen. The scandal, the disaster, the poor planning. Carter really bore the brunt of all of that criticism. And so when he ran for re-election against Ronald Reagan in 1980, it was an absolute blowout. Reagan completely destroyed him. Everybody was through with Jimmy Carter. But there's parallels in his presidency to what we're seeing now in Washington because Trump coming back for a second term, when Trump was elected the first time in 2016, he got similar treatment in Washington that Jimmy Carter received in 1976. And, that's amazing because Carter was a Democrat and Trump, of course, a Republican. But it just underscores what we've been telling you here on Need to Know for a long, long time, that it's the Washington organism that is the entity that does not welcome any outsiders, does not embrace any new ideas, that really wants to operate from a standpoint of their own bureaucrats, their departments, agencies, bureaus, people that you never vote for, people that are appointed to lifetime positions. They have control. And Carter in 1976 ran into that, coming to Washington and immediately being chastised by the media as some yokel who had no business in that particularly elitist situation. Although, as I told you in the beginning, he was multi-degreed. Jimmy Carter was certainly no dumb hick, but he brought a lot of his people with him, surrounding him, a lot of interesting characters like his brother Billy, who was a pretty well-known bum and kind of a drunk and not very accomplished. Remember, Billy Beer was developed in 1970s during the Carter administration. He was kind of an embarrassment. Carter also got off to a bad start with a very bad idea. He was interviewed and published in Playboy magazine, of all places. Carter was extremely devout, taught Sunday school his entire life, was a real man of God, and there's no questioning his faith. So for him to appear in the Playboy interview and really be very candid, as he tended to be, he was just chastised the rest of his life for the unfortunate line when the reporter asked him about his attraction and desire for women. And he said, like any man, I feel lust in my heart, which they really used that line against him to question his faith and his devout Christianity by saying that, he actually was attracted to women. So, he was not treated fairly. He was shunned by Washington insiders, much as Donald Trump was in 2016. So they ran into similar welcomes in Washington because they did not emerge from inside the Beltway and were not part of the Washington organism. And it's most unfortunate. that mired his presidency, and all the other economic problems and problems overseas in places like Iran and the Middle East, where Carter really wasn't equipped from an experience standpoint to handle that, and didn't surround himself with effective cabinet members. So we lose Jimmy Carter, born in 1924, dies 3 days short of 2025. In 2024, he was 100 years old, which that gives him quite a distinction of the with Trump coming in being the 47th president of the previous 46. Jimmy Carter, the oldest president in terms of lifespan, the first president in U.S. history who passed away having reached the age of 100. Rest in peace, Jimmy Carter. A complicated man, really going down in history for not being a very successful president, but certainly a man that has earned respect, because in the 40 years post presidency, this guy really tried everything to help as many people as possible, probably as personally responsible for Habitat of Humanity, who, of course, has built homes, thousands and tens of thousands of homes for underprivileged and impoverished people. Carter did a lot of good diplomatic work for the United States, and went to countries where elections were contentious, and was a stabilizing force and monitor in a lot of countries that were under dictatorships, and gave confidence to a lot of people, a lot of citizens in these countries, that their elections were being conducted fairly. Said a lot of controversial things, took some stands later in his life, but was pretty sharp cat still into his 90s, and it's a sad day anytime we lose an American president. There's only five surviving presidents remaining now, and they are the five most recent, going back to, of course, Bill Clinton and George W. Bush, Barack Obama, etc., and of course now Joe Biden and Donald Trump. So we lose Jimmy Carter overnight at the age of 100. The 39th president of the United States now belongs to the ages. Quickly in 2024, as we start to wave goodbye to that year and look ahead to 2025 with great optimism and hope, we lost a lot of luminaries in 2024. I'm struck by the fact that two of my favorite cameo actors from the great sitcom that ended 2 years ago, that had a fantastic 12-year run, The Big Bang Theory. They had a parade of celebrity guests on that show over the years. And a lot of them were the geriatric variety, really familiar stars, and it really kind of married the eras of that program to yesteryear, because one of the most prominent, of course, William Shatner, who's still with us and still hosting some shows on the History Channel and some other places. But we lost a couple of the giants in the entertainment industry that both had made prominent appearances in recent years on The Big Bang Theory, and that included the great James Earl Jones, who we lost in 2024. James Earl Jones, of course, the voice of Darth Vader from the Star Wars movies, portrayed a whole variety of characters in many films and television roles throughout his career. One of my favorites is, of course, the Robert Redford movie, where actually it was not a Robert Redford movie. I just had a vision of the wrong actor. Kevin Costner was the star, of course, in Field of Dreams, and James Earl Jones played a character set after J.D. Salinger, who wrote Catcher in the Rye. He had written a book in that movie supposedly called The Boat Rocker, which was sort of the same thing, and had, like Salinger, disappeared after becoming prominent because he just didn't want to be bothered anymore. If you remember the story, Costner goes and finds him in Boston, takes him to a baseball game because the voice whispering to him in the cornfields it seems to indicate that that's what he's supposed to do. And it turns out that it's one of the great roles for James Earl Jones in his career, as he comes back to the Iowa farm in the Field of Dreams, and has a great soliloquy in that movie talking about as America has rolled across the plains like a runaway freight train, there has always been baseball. Really dramatic stuff. James Earl Jones appearing on The Big Bang Theory as himself. The quirky Sheldon character goes and finds him eating in a sushi restaurant, trying to get him interested in appearing in Sheldon's comic book festival. James Earl Jones famously plays the comedic role in just grand style. As he's sitting there eating, he looks up and there's Sheldon standing there looking at him like a adoring puppy. And he says, "Let me guess, you like Star Wars." And Sheldon just kind of nods because he's just awestruck. And James Earl Jones goes, "Well, I've only got one thing to say about guys like you." And he looks at Sheldon, and you're expecting him to chastise him. He says, "I like Star Wars too. Sit down." So Sheldon sits with James Earl Jones. They start yucking it up. James Earl Jones invites him, "Let's go have some fun. I've got a Lion King check, a residual check burning a hole in my pocket." They go to a karaoke bar. They go to a strip club. They're running all around neighborhoods ringing doorbells, including Carrie Fisher's, of course, from Star Wars fame. James Earl Jones goes, "Okay, I'm going to ring the bell, but get ready to run. She's a little crazy." I mean, the show is just so much fun. They end up in a steam room. Sheldon is obviously very buttoned down, quirky, geeky. Sheldon is so amazed to be running around with James Earl Jones, but he's so uncomfortable because they're doing things that he would never consider doing. They're in a steam room in towels at the end. And, that's how it kind of wraps up. But James Earl Jones, just a brilliant performance there. And it just made you appreciate just the range this guy had and that voice. Will there ever be another voice like that? "I am your father." Uh, just a guy that we're gonna miss mightily. I think he lived a long, fantastic life, 88 years old upon his passing, and James Earl Jones gone. Another one is probably one of my favorite comedic actors, performers, comedians. The great Bob Newhart passed away in 2024. He also had a recurring role on The Big Bang Theory as the boyhood hero of Sheldon and Leonard, both the main characters. Professor Proton. Supposedly, he had been on like a local TV, like public TV station every afternoon with some kind of science show where he'd do simple experiments for kids, and it was kind of a Captain Kangaroo figure mythically on The Big Bang Theory. They discover he lives in L.A. They invite him over, and the first time you hear Professor Proton's coming, you have no idea that the guy who emerges at the top step is Bob Newhart. And Bob Newhart was a guy that was a Midwestern sort, very non-flamboyant, almost a little bit grumpy, or just had that kind of demeanor in terms of the characters he played. But it was his timing and his voice inflection and kind of a fake stutter that he really perfected to just deliver that kind of timing. There was a scene in that first time when he met Penny, the female character played by Kaylee Kaku, of course, who is just a phenomenally beautiful young woman, especially at that point of that series. She was probably only in her mid-20s. She comes down and she's standing next to Leonard and Bob Newhart. Bob Newhart is complaining about being exhausted from trying to climb the stairs up their apartment. She rounds the corner, and all of a sudden he perks right up. And he says, "Well, hello." And, he's about 80, late 80s at that time, and it really got him energized. And later on in the apartment, the Penny character always was kind of limited in intellect. He asked, or she asked a couple stupid questions. He pulls out a potato from his bag, uh, because he's going to do a trick where he can plug some I don't know what you call them, different components into a potato and power a clock. And Penny goes, "Wouldn't that's amazing? Wouldn't a bunch of potatoes help solve the world's energy crisis?" And he looks at her with this derisive look and says, "No, no." Um, and then Sheldon goes, "Is she annoying you? Because if she is, I can make her leave." And he says, in just classic Bob Newhart fashion, no, she doesn't need to leave. Actually, she's the only reason I've stayed this long." So just great stuff. He came on always, ironically, they killed his character off. He passes away, and then in the subsequent seasons, makes a couple cameos a year as a ghost, basically a figment of Sheldon's unconscious mind, who comes and counsels him on different things. At one point, and most of the time, he's wearing like Jedi robes from Star Wars, which he's very uncomfortable with. At one point, he goes, "Hey, why do I always have to wear this robe?" And Sheldon says, "Well, that's your Jedi costume." And he says, I don't have on any underwear." It was just great stuff. And Bob Newhart was just a comedic genius. To lose both those guys in the same year, very devastating indeed. And in fact, the Big Bang Theory, while we're kind of on that subject, I find it fascinating that so many people who made cameos, and once again, the reason, of course, is a lot of these people were well into their 80s and even pushing 90 when they came on. But one of the last times we ever saw Adam West, who played, of course, the original Batman character on the TV show, was on The Big Bang Theory. It turns out that Sheldon was disappointed as a 6-year-old that Batman was supposed to come to his party, his birthday party, and didn't come. So, of course, the guys round up Adam West, who's is still in L.A. and well into his 80s, and invite him to Sheldon's birthday party. And Sheldon's confused at first. He says, "Oh, we got all these people here. There's so and so and so, sir, and Adam West for some reason." Um, and Leonard lets him know, "Well, he's here for your birthday party. Batman's at your birthday." And of course, when Batman Adam West is supposed to give Sheldon a toast, he says, "I'm available for bachelor parties, bar mitzvahs, birthday celebrations." He's kind of giving a plug to try to round up some more money. Very funny. They have a big discussion about who the greatest Batman character actor ever was, and Adam West goes, Clooney and Val Kilmer and whoever else they mentioned. Uh, you know, their Batman suit was all full of pads. What you saw when I was in my Batman suit was 100% pure West. So just these guys in these comedic roles on that show were so entertaining, and I just value getting to see them again. Stan Lee, with the unbelievable creator of so many of the different characters you see in all these modern day Marvel movies, and he was a recurring character. Stan Lee, of course, unfortunately has passed away now. Leonard Nimoy, who is Sheldon's hero, Spock, also appeared on The Big Bang Theory before his demise in 2015. They just had a whole series of them. I mentioned Carrie Fisher. She died unexpectedly on an airline flight a couple of years after appearing. And another actress named Jessica Walter, you might not remember, she was kind of a it girl in the 1960s in a lot of movies, even in some of the Rat Pack movies with Frank Sinatra. Jessica Walter appeared in The Big Bang Theory in her 70s as a rich socialite who gets invited to a fundraiser at the university. ends up with a liking of the Leonard character, and basically, as an elderly woman, kind of seduces Leonard, and in very comedic fashion. We lost her as well. So, quite a list there from the Big Bang Theory. Other prominent people that we've lost in 2024 included some big time actors like and performers. Chris Christopherson passed away this year. We also lost some other giants like Donald Sutherland, a lot of entertainers and musical personnel. Toby Keith passed away. Of course, the great Quincy Jones, who was responsible for so many different eras of music. It's always sad to look back at who's not going to be going with us. Tony and I talked about on the radio the other day the passing of Pete Rose, who also did a documentary last year for HBO and said, well, it's apparent now that they will never consider me for the Hall of Fame till I die. And baseball won that Mexican standoff. And it's really tragic that the greatest hitter in Major League Baseball history went to the grave, never having received the honor. His penance was paid for any transgression with a 30-plus-year ban from baseball, cost him all kinds of notoriety and millions of dollars that he could have made as a manager or team executive. Probably the harshest sentence ever given out for any offense, particularly one that didn't harm any other individual. Pete Rose had a gambling problem. There was no two ways about that. But he also had a competitor's problem when he left the Cincinnati Reds, retiring after breaking Ty Cobb's unbreakable record, setting the hit king mark. Pete Rose missed and he'd been a hustler all his life. He was tagged Charlie Hustle in a spring training game in the early 1960s by Mickey Mantle and Whitey Ford of the New York Yankees. But it was a derisive comment because in a spring training game he was busting his butt and hustling around and crashing into walls. And they said, "Look at Charlie Hustle out there making fun of him." But Pete loved that nickname and embraced it because that's how he played and that's how he lived his life. And it's really, really sad that Pete Rose will never experience the accolades of being in the Hall of Fame where he so richly deserved to be. We lost some other sports giants literally last year. Bill Walton, Big Red, who led the UCLA Bruins to national championships, also the Portland Trailblazers to an NBA title. Late in the later years of his life, he was a color commentator on a lot of basketball, particularly out from the West Coast. Always a complete maverick, a big consumer of a lot of natural products. But we lost Big Red Bill Walton. Dikembe Mutombo, the great shot blocking center and just wonderful human being, did so much for so many. We lost him this past year. A whole slew of prominent people on that list. Looking down, also comedian Martin Mull. We lost Phil Donahue, the talk show host. Willie Mays, the Say Hey Kid, one of the best lines of the whole year at Rickwood Field here in Birmingham. Willie Mays, a week before the Rickwood Classic, which was to honor him. He was born, of course, in Westfield, just west of downtown Birmingham. Had a fantastic career, was one of the greatest players to ever set foot on a baseball field. He regrettably announced a week before the Rickwood Classic this past summer that he was just not in good enough health to make the trip to Birmingham. And amazingly, basically the night before the Rickwood Classic, Willie Mays passed away. And I still think it's one of the most poignant things I heard in many years when his son was making a speech on his behalf at the opening ceremonies before the game between the Giants and the Cardinals. He said, "My father wanted so badly to be here to thank everybody in his hometown and just have this night of acknowledgement." He said, "But it wasn't to be. But you know what? Like Willie Mays did his entire life, he found a way to be here." And I thought that was just such a cool comment and so appropriate for the occasion that Willie was there because he had a day before departed this world. and was looking down at the festivities after all. That's what we've got for this week's Need to Know. We got a big year coming up. The Republicans are already shooting themselves in the foot as they get ready to take the mantle of power in Washington. There's infighting, there's disagreement, there's stupidity. Welcome to Washington. Welcome to politics. Welcome to the D.C. swamp. We will have coverage on that and everything else as the year transcends. Happy New Year to each and every one of you. Whatever you're doing, wherever you're going, be safe, be smart, get the year off to a good start. I've had such a privilege of being able to come to you every week here on TKR and give you my thoughts. And hopefully you get a few grains of knowledge or things that are interested. Because, again, the idea of this program is to encourage you to think for yourself, reach your own conclusions, take the time to consider issues, read up on things. Don't rely on anybody else because what you have between your ears is the most impressive thing you can possibly imagine. And the power of the mind is something never to diminish. Have a great New Year's, everybody. We will talk to you on the other side next week in 2025. This is Kip Kiefer signing off on this edition of Need to Know.
This has been a special presentation of Tony Kurre Radio.